Saturday night, 11:44 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. A Truth Social notification flashes across millions of screens. It reads, if Iran doesn't fully open, without threat, the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours from this exact point in time, the United States of America will hit and obliterate their various power plants, starting with the biggest one first. No diplomatic language, no careful phrasing, no White House press secretary softening the edges. Just a president, a deadline, and a threat to plunge 90 million people into darkness. This is not a drill. This is not political theater. This is the most dangerous 48 hours in global energy history. And most people have absolutely no idea how serious this actually is. If you've been following this channel, you already know we don't sensationalize. We break down what's actually happening, while the mainstream media gives you headlines. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now. What you're about to hear matters. Not just for the Middle East, for your gas bill, your food prices, your economy, your world. Here's what you need to understand before anything else. The Strait of Hormuz is a 21-mile wide strip of water. 21 miles. You could drive that in 20 minutes. And right now, that 21-mile strip is strangling the entire global economy. Before this war started, roughly 1/5 of all the world's oil passed through it every single day. Nearly 20 million barrels. Every sunrise, every sunset. Moving through that narrow choke point between Iran and Oman. Add to that 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas. The fertilizers that feed billions. The industrial chemicals that build everything. All of it. Through 21 miles of water. Iran closed it. On March 2nd, a senior commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps stood before cameras and said 6 words that shook the planet. The strait is closed, no exceptions. Since that moment, shipping traffic through the Hormuz has collapsed by 95%. Not slowed, not reduced, collapsed. Virtually nothing is getting through. The oil tankers that once moved like clockwork now sit anchored in harbors, their crews watching and waiting. The world just lost its jugular vein, and it's bleeding out. Now understand what happened to get us here. February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched coordinated strikes on Iran. The strikes killed Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei. That was the moment everything changed. Iran's response was immediate. Missile strikes on American bases across the Gulf, drone attacks on Gulf state infrastructure, and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran made the calculation that the one thing it could do to hurt the West more than any missile strike was this: cut the oil. They were right. Within days, Brent crude exploded upward. Before the war, oil sat at roughly $70 a barrel. A week into the conflict, it had already spiked to nearly $120. Today, it is trading above $109, still nearly 80% higher than the day this war began. West Texas Intermediate, America's benchmark, has nearly doubled. At the pump, American drivers are paying close to $4 a gallon for gasoline, up 80 cents in a single month. Diesel is approaching $5 a gallon, more than $1 higher than just weeks ago. And that is with strategic petroleum reserves being released at record pace. The U.S. and its allies dumped 400 million barrels of emergency reserves into the market, the single largest emergency release in history, just to buy time. The time is running out. Iran did not just close the strait with a declaration. It backed that declaration with steel and fire. Iranian forces have attacked more than 21 merchant ships attempting to transit the waterway. They've struck oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman. They hit a tanker anchored 500 miles away in Kuwait. They sank a tugboat sent to help an already damaged vessel. 3 crew members from that tugboat are still missing. American intelligence confirms something even more alarming. At least a dozen Iranian naval mines are now sitting in the Strait of Hormuz, sitting on the seafloor, invisible, waiting. Think about that for a moment. Mines, in the most important shipping lane on Earth. The last time Iran did something like this was during the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s. Back then, they mined the Persian Gulf and set oil tankers ablaze in what became known as the Tanker War. The U.S. eventually intervened militarily to protect shipping. It worked. But that was a different era, a different Iran, different weapons, different stakes. This time, Iran isn't just mining the strait. It's launching cruise missiles at passing ships from underground coastal bunkers. It's deploying naval drones that can track targets and strike without warning. It's threatening to mine the entire Persian Gulf if attacked. The U.S. military has been busy. Central Command reports striking more than 9,000 Iranian targets since the war began. Over 9,000 combat flights. More than 140 Iranian naval vessels destroyed or degraded. The underground bunker storing Iran's anti-ship cruise missiles near the strait was obliterated with 5,000-pound bunker buster bombs. And still, the strait remains closed. That is the context for Trump's ultimatum. Not the first ultimatum, not even the second. On March 26th, Trump gave Iran a 10-day deadline to open the Hormuz or face strikes on its power plants and energy infrastructure. 10 days, a negotiating window, a chance to de-escalate. Iran's parliament speaker responded by threatening to destroy every American energy facility in the region. Quote, critical infrastructure, energy infrastructure, and oil facilities. All of them. Trump extended the deadline. Then last Saturday night, the extension expired, and Trump came back harder. 48 hours, fully open, without threat, or we obliterate your power plants, starting with the biggest one first. Then the following Sunday, he posted again. Expletive-laden, unfiltered. He wrote that Tuesday would be, in his words, Power Plant Day and Bridge Day, all wrapped up in one. He clarified the new deadline, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday. He signed off the message with, Praise be to Allah. Senator Lindsey Graham called Trump directly after reading the post. His message to Iran was blunt. If you don't know by now that Trump means what he says, you will never know. Behind the scenes, quiet diplomacy was also moving. Vice President J.D. Vance was leading indirect talks. The mediator, Pakistan's military chief, Field Marshal Asim Munir. Iran's parliament speaker was on the other end of those conversations. Monday morning, Trump announced the talks had been very good and productive. The deadline was postponed again. Iran denied any talks had taken place. Iranian state media called Trump's postponement a retreat born out of fear. A senior Iranian foreign ministry official told reporters separately that yes, messages from the United States had arrived through intermediaries, and they were being reviewed. Both things can be true at once. That is what makes this situation so combustible. Now understand exactly what Trump is threatening to bomb, because the target list is not symbolic. Iran's power grid is centralized, aging, and fragile. The country operates roughly 80 major power plants. The largest, the Shahid Rajeh thermal power plant near Bandar Abbas, supplies electricity to much of southern Iran, including the very coastal military facilities that threaten the Strait of Hormuz. Destroy the power plants and you don't just turn off the lights. You shut down water pumping stations. You disable the hospitals. You knock out the early warning radar systems. You collapse the military command infrastructure that coordinates mine laying and ship attacks. That is the strategic logic. Break the power grid, break the ability to wage war. But here is what the United States military planners know, and the social media posts don't say. Iran has buried critical command infrastructure deep underground. They spent decades preparing for exactly this scenario. Their most vital military assets are hardened. Some civilian infrastructure is not. Striking power plants means striking facilities that serve civilian populations. 90 million Iranians live under that grid. Hospitals would go dark. Water would stop flowing within hours in cities with no backup reserves. In summer heat, that becomes a humanitarian catastrophe within days. The international community knows this, which is why the reaction to Trump's threat has been complicated silence. Countries that would normally condemn Iran's mine-laying are equally uncomfortable with the prospect of mass civilian power outages. Iran's military command issued its own counter-threat. If its energy infrastructure is hit, every American energy facility in the Middle East is a target. That means refineries in Saudi Arabia, terminals in the UAE, processing facilities in Kuwait, all of it. A strike on Iran's power plants does not end the crisis. It transforms it. There is another story embedded inside this ultimatum that almost nobody is covering. A U.S. F-15 fighter jet went down over Iran. The pilot ejected. The search continues. Iran claims it shot the aircraft down. They have taken credit for what would be the first American fighter jet destroyed by Iranian forces since this war began. A separate incident involved an A-10 Warthog near the Strait of Hormuz, also claimed by Iran. If Iran captured that F-15 pilot, the equation shifts dramatically. A captured American pilot is leverage. Real leverage. The kind that can pause ultimatums and rewrite negotiating terms. It gives Tehran something to trade, something to parade, something to prove that American air superiority over Iran is not as absolute as Washington has claimed. Trump told NBC News the downed jet would not affect negotiations. Quote, "No, not at all. No, it's war." Analysts at King's College London see it differently. A captured pilot undermines every claim of U.S. dominance over Iranian airspace. It complicates the narrative. It creates a crisis within the crisis. The economic consequences of keeping this strait closed are not future projections. They are already here. The International Energy Agency has called this the greatest global energy security challenge in recorded history. Not a challenge, the greatest. Oil production from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, and the UAE has collectively dropped by at least 10 million barrels per day. 10 million. The world consumes about 100 million barrels a day. That is a 10% global supply shock. And it is not theoretical. It is happening right now. In the Gulf states themselves, the crisis has become something darker than an energy crisis. These countries import more than 80% of their food through the Strait of Hormuz. Kuwait and Qatar get 99% of their drinking water from desalination plants. Those plants run on electricity and fuel that move through the strait. Iran struck desalination infrastructure. Grocery prices across the Gulf spiked 40 to 120% within weeks. Food import disruptions hit 70%. Some retailers are airlifting basic staples just to keep shelves from going empty. This is not a crisis happening somewhere abstract. The Philippines declared a state of emergency. Zimbabwe, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nigeria, and Vietnam are all facing severe fuel shortages. Europe is staring down the barrel of a gas crisis because Qatar's LNG, which normally flows through the strait, has stopped moving. European natural gas prices have nearly doubled. Economists at Goldman Sachs are now warning oil prices could reach $170 a barrel if the closure continues. At $170, global inflation does not just tick upward, it accelerates. Recession becomes the baseline scenario for Europe and East Asia, not the tail risk. The Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas modeled a 90-day strait closure. Their conclusion: a 2.9% quarterly GDP decline. A 6-month closure wipes out U.S. economic growth for the rest of the year. The deadline on this ultimatum is not just about missiles and power plants. It is about whether the global economy survives 2026. So where does this actually go? Trump has now extended his deadline multiple times. Each extension has been followed by a harder threat. Each threat has been followed by Iran calling it weakness. Each call of weakness has been followed by an even more extreme Trump post. This is not a cycle that ends quietly. There are a small number of realistic outcomes. Iran agrees to reopen the strait through backdoor negotiations and calls it a victory of diplomacy. Trump calls it a capitulation and claims credit. The strait reopens and the world exhales. That is the optimistic scenario. Markets are pricing in a version of it. Stocks jumped when Trump postponed his Monday deadline. Brent crude fell more than 10% on hopes of a deal. But there is another scenario. Negotiations collapse. Trump orders strikes on the power plants. Iran retaliates against Gulf energy infrastructure. Saudi Arabia's oil facilities take a hit. The 10 million barrel per day supply shock doubles. Oil crosses $170, then $200. The global economy doesn't just slow, it fractures. A $200 barrel of oil has never happened in history. The consequences are not fully modeled. They have never had to be. The mainstream media is covering this as a Trump drama, a Twitter war, a bluffing match between strongmen. They are showing you the deadline. They are not showing you the mines on the seafloor. They are not explaining that the world's emergency petroleum reserves have already been burned through at record pace and are running low. They are not telling you that by mid-April, the oil supply disruption is projected to double. They are not walking you through what happens to the 90 million people inside Iran if the power grid gets destroyed. They are not showing you the food lines forming in Kuwait, the fuel rationing in Manila, the diesel trucks sitting idle in Bangladesh, the desalination plants that are one strike away from leaving millions without water. This story is not about Trump's language on Truth Social. It is about a 21-mile strip of water that holds the global economy hostage. It is about a war with no clean exit. It is about a deadline that has already been extended multiple times and is heading for a moment when extending it further stops being possible. 28 dead in Israel from Iranian missile strikes, thousands hospitalized, mines in the strait, a captured pilot missing somewhere in Iran, oil at prices not seen in history, and a president giving an ultimatum written in all caps at midnight. The clock is not a metaphor. The question is not whether this gets worse before it gets better. The question is how much worse, and whether the world has the stomach to find out.